And I would have told you what some of my concerns would have been. And my concerns would have been, do we have a message that will resonate with the American people? And what I've learned in the last 4 months, we sure as heck do. Not just that we have had the largest turnouts of any campaign here in New Hampshire or in Iowa. We have had unbelievable turnouts in Denver, in Minneapolis. In Dallas, we had 8,000 people. In Phoenix, we have had 11,000 people. Next week, we are heading to Seattle and to Portland, Oregon. And, you know, we got places for 10,000 people, and I think that's probably going to be too small. So, there is no question in my mind that the message that we are bringing forth, that there is something fundamentally wrong in a nation where so few have so much. Whereas Levy just mentioned, we have a corrupt political system which allows billionaires to buy elections. That message is in fact resonating all across New Hampshire, Iowa, and the rest of America. And the thing that makes me very, very proud is that at a time when every major candidate has a super PAC. And what super PACs mean is that the money is going to come in from millionaires and billionaires, and without exception, there will be more money going into the super PACs controlled by billionaires than the candidates are raising themselves. Okay? I am very proud that we are the only campaign that does not have a super PAC. I am extremely grateful that we have received individual contributions from 300,000 Americans, more than any other campaign, averaging $35. That's what our campaign is about. This is a people's campaign. Some of you may know that on Wednesday night we did something that was unprecedented in American political history, and that is, at this early stage in a campaign, we had a internet organizational meeting which had 3,700 locations in 50 states in America, bringing out over 100,000 people who are now involved in the campaign. And as my son said a moment ago, this campaign is not about Bernie Sanders. It is not about Hillary Clinton. It's not about Jeb Bush. It is not even about Donald Trump. Media doesn't understand that, but that's the case. It's about you. And it's about your kids. It's about your parents. It's about the planet. It's about the future of America. And what I will tell you tonight, no other candidate will tell you. And that is, given the nature of the American economic and political system, no candidate, not the best candidate in the world, not Bernie Sanders, anybody else, who gets elected president can accomplish the things that are needed for the middle class of this country unless there is a strong grassroots movement of millions of people who are prepared to stand up and loudly and clearly proclaim this country belongs to all of us and not just a handful of billionaires. That's not just rhetoric. That is what I mean from the bottom of my heart, and I will tell you why. Because no president is strong enough alone to take on Wall Street, the large campaign contributors, the lobbyists, corporate America, without the active participation of a politically conscious electorate. Barack Obama is a friend of mine. I like him very much, and I consider him a personal friend, and I think he has done a whole lot for this country. If you remember where we were 7 years ago, you understand how far we have come, and Obama deserves a lot of credit for that. But there is one mistake that he has made, a very big mistake. In 2008, he ran a brilliant campaign to become President of America, a campaign which mobilized millions of people of all colors, all economic backgrounds, young people. But what he did the day after the election, in so many words, was to say to the millions of people who put him into office, to say, thank you very much for electing me, but I'll take it from here. I'm on my own right now. That was a major mistake. And it was a major mistake not just because the Republicans never really wanted to negotiate seriously. It was a mistake because the only way we bring change is when millions of people are mobilized to tell Wall Street, to tell corporate America, they are not going to get it all. We are, in fact, have a political agenda which speaks to the needs of working families and not just the wealthy. So the bad news for you all is we have all of your names in our computer files, and I need you not just to help us win here in New Hampshire. I will need you the day after the election as well. That's the only way we go forward, is by doing it together. Now, politics, in truth, is a lot less complicated than many people think it is. In a democratic society, what honest politics is supposed to be about is to say, what are the problems facing this country? Where do we want to go? How do we get there? That's about it. It's no different than walking into a doctor's office and saying, okay, I got some problems. Tell me what's wrong with me. Prescribe a therapy that improves my health. That's about it. Unfortunately, what we have had for many years now is a media which makes politics into a baseball game. All right, how much money are you raising? How are you doing in the polls? What dumb thing did your campaign manager say? Or a soap opera, talking about the personal lives, wanting candidates to beat up other candidates, to say dumb things. If I attacked Hillary Clinton today, in strong terms, it would be front pages all over America. But I am not going to do that. All right? Because what I think, despite what the media may want, is we are going to focus on the real issues facing our people, often issues that are not discussed or debated enough. And I respect other people have different points of view. That's fine. But let's lay the issues out on the table that are impacting the middle class and working families of our country and go from there. And that's what this campaign is about. We're looking at a candidate who has run very often for mayor of Burlington, Vermont. I was mayor there for 8 years, ran for the House of Representatives, elected 8 times, ran for the United States Senate, elected twice, and in all of those years, against a lot of money people, a lot of ugly ads that were thrown against me, I have never run a negative ad in my life. Okay? Because I believe that the people of Vermont, and I believe the American people, don't want to hear that. They don't believe that I'm perfect, that all the people running against me are terrible, awful people. That's not the way it is. What they want to know is what we think about the issues that will improve their lives, the lives of their kids, and how we go forward. And that is, whether the media likes it or not, that is the campaign that I will run. Let me touch on some of the profound issues that face our country, and I happen to believe that if you throw in the huge planetary crisis of climate change, the problems that we face today are more severe than at any time since the Great Depression. We got a lot of issues out there. I think they are solvable, but let me lay them on the table. All right, number one, the top of my list is the issue of income and wealth inequality. Yeah. What is this issue about? What does it mean? It means, in the deepest sense, we have got to make a decision about what kind of country we wish to be. Are we content to be living in a country in which ordinary Americans are working longer hours for lower wages, a nation in which we have by far the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth, while at the same time we have seen a proliferation of millionaires and billionaires? Is that the country we want to be? No! Are we content? No! I didn't even ask the question. This is a group of discontented people. All right, and you should be. We are living in a nation today. Now listen to this. I hate to bore people with facts, but occasionally facts, every now and then we want to throw out some facts. In America today, if you can believe this, the top 1/10 of 1%, not 1%, 1/10 of 1% owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. Got that? 1/10 of 1%, 90%. You're living in a country in which the last 30 years, the percentage of wealth owned by the top 1/10 of 1% has doubled, while the percentage owned by the middle class has shrunk considerably. In America today, one family, this is the United States of America, one family, the Walton family, owns more wealth than the bottom 42% of the American people. In America today, in the last 2 years, the top 14 wealthiest people in America, 14 people, saw their wealth increase by $157 billion. 14 people. That increase in wealth is more wealth than is owned by the bottom 130 million Americans. Disgusting. In the last year, right now, 57% of all new income, as opposed to wealth, is going to the top 1%. In other words, you are living in a rigged economy. The very, very rich get richer, everybody else gets poorer, and that's an economy that together we are going to change. And that's an issue. That is a moral issue. Are we content when so few have so much and so many have so little? But there's another issue out there in terms of the economy. And let's lay this one on the table. Put it right on the table. Yes, the economy today is much, much better than it was 7 years ago when Bush left office. 7 years ago, as you all remember, we were losing 800,000 jobs a month. That is an unbelievable number. The financial system of this country and the world were on the verge of collapse. We ran a $1.4 trillion deficit, unprecedented. Are we in better shape today? Absolutely. But, and here's the big but, we are still continuing a 40-year disappearance of the American middle class. And here's what's going on. Despite an explosion of technology, which makes every worker in America more productive, we have millions of people working longer hours for lower wages. You would think that if I gave you a tool to make you more productive, you would be working fewer hours at higher wages. That is not the case. You know and I know that in your state and across the Connecticut River in my state, we have all kinds of folks who are working 2 or 3 jobs just to cobble together a living income and some health care. So the question that we have to put on the table is, how does it happen? With an increase in worker productivity, people are working longer hours for low wages, median family income, that family right in the middle of the American economy, is making almost $5,000 less than they did in 1999. In my view, we need to create policies which improve the lives of working families in this country, an economy that works for the middle class, not just an economy that works for the top 1%. Let me mention something else. One of the fun things about running for president is you can raise issues that everybody else wants to avoid, wants to put under the rug. All right, here's one of those issues. Every month, the federal government issues a number of reports regarding unemployment. The report that gets most of the attention is what the official unemployment rate is. And right now, the last report had us nationally at about 5.3% lower in New Hampshire and Vermont than the national. Do you all understand that the official unemployment rate is different than the real unemployment rate? The real unemployment rate includes those millions of people who have given up looking for work in high unemployment areas, and more importantly, the many millions who are working part-time, 20 or 30 hours a week, when they want to work full-time. If you add those numbers together, real unemployment in America is 10.5%. So don't let anybody tell you we've solved the unemployment problem. Only 5.3%. Wrong. It is 10.5%. And let me tell you something even more tragic and frightening than that. Virtually nobody in this country is talking about a major tragedy of youth unemployment. It is not put on the table. A month ago, I asked the Economic Policy Institute, a very good progressive think tank, to take a look at real youth unemployment in America. Kids who have no jobs. These are high school graduates, 17 to 20, who are either unemployed, underemployed, or have given up looking for work. The statistics that they brought back to me were that if those kids were white, 33% were unemployed or underemployed. If they were Hispanic, 36%. If they were African American, 51%. In other words, we have over 5 million young people here in New Hampshire, in Vermont, all over this country, who are not in school, who have no jobs, who are hanging out on street corners, who are doing self-destructive activities. And if anybody in this room thinks that it is an accident or a coincidence that we have more people in jail than any other country on earth when you have youth unemployment numbers at that level, you would be sorely mistaken. It is my very, very strong view that instead of investing in incarceration and jails, now is the time to invest in education and jobs. I will do my best to end this dubious distinction of our country having more people in jail than any other country. I want our country to have the best educated population of any country, not more people in jail. When we talk about the economy, it's unemployment, it's income and wealth inequality, but there is another issue that we have to talk about. And that is the reason why people are working more hours in America than in any other major country on earth, why people are working 2 or 3 jobs. And that is that millions of our people are working at abysmally, unacceptably low wages. The minimum wage, in my view, the national minimum wage of $7.25 an hour is a starvation wage. It has got to be raised to a living wage, $15 an hour over the next few years. It is not a radical idea to say that somebody who works 40 hours a week in America should not be living in poverty. And when we talk about wages and when we talk about income, we also have got to end this absurdity that women in America are making 78 cents on the dollar compared to men. And I hope every man in this room will stand with the women and demand pay equity, equal pay for equal work. There are too many women in this country, including many single moms, who are desperately trying to raise families with security and dignity, and they cannot do it when they're not paid equal pay. When we have pay equity, we're going to take a big chunk out of poverty, and that is exactly what we have to do. And when we talk about the needs of working families in this country, it is absolutely imperative that we begin to talk about family values that reflect the real needs of the American people and not what our Republican colleagues are talking about. All of you know that when my Republican colleagues in the Senate and the House and so forth talk about family values, what they are telling us is that women in America do not have the right to control their own bodies. That's what this attack on Planned Parenthood is about. I disagree. What they are telling us in their view of family values is that women are not smart enough to buy the contraceptives they need. I disagree. And moreover, what they are saying when they talk about family values is that our gay brothers and sisters should not be entitled to the same rights as straight couples, should not be able to get married. I disagree. I have 4 kids. I have 7 beautiful grandchildren, including 3 here in New Hampshire. I have been married for 27 years. I believe in family values. But the family values that I believe in are values that are supportive of loving families, not destructive of families. The values that I believe in are that the United States has got to end the international embarrassment of us being the only major country on earth that does not guarantee paid family and medical leave. Today in New Hampshire, today in Vermont, a woman is giving birth, and that is obviously a huge moment, a huge day for that woman, for that family, and also a pretty big day for the baby. But here's the story. Let's think about it for a second. If that woman has good income, she will be able to stay home with her baby for weeks and for months, get to know her baby, get to love her baby, get to bond with the baby. Father will be able to stay home with that baby. That's an extraordinary experience. Every parent here knows what that experience is about.
Every psychologist knows that the first weeks and months of a baby's life are hugely important for the intellectual and emotional development of that baby. But if that woman who gave birth today does not have sufficient income, you know what she has to do? In a week, in 8 days, whatever, she will have to take her baby, give that baby to somebody else, and go back to work to earn an income. Forcing women to separate from their newborn babies is not a family value. It is absolutely the opposite of a family value. And that is why I will fight for 3 months paid family and medical leave for every family in America. And we are also going to end the international disgrace of being the only major country on earth that does not guarantee paid sick leave and paid vacation time for our workers as well. When pollsters go out and they call you up on the phone and they say, "What's on your mind?" Usually the first thing that people say, the top of the list, is a 4-letter word called jobs, J-O-B-S. And the reason that people say that is they are very, very insecure economically in America today. People are really nervous. What they know is if they are 50, 55 years of age, they are fearful that if they walk into their jobs tomorrow, their boss may pull them aside and say, "Hey, really sorry, but you know, we've kind of have to replace you, and we've got a guy or a woman who's half your age, and turns out we're going to pay them half the pay that you get." And if you're a young person, a high school graduate, a college graduate, very, very difficult to get a decent paying job. And if you're a factory worker, people are scared to death that the owner may come in and say, "Sorry, we've shut down the plant, we're moving to China." That's why people are very anxious economically in this country today. In my view, what the American people want and deserve is a massive federal jobs program creating millions of good-paying jobs. And the best way to do that is to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, water systems, wastewater. We used to have the strongest infrastructure in the world, the best rail system in the world. We are now falling further and further behind other countries. And that is why I've introduced legislation, which I will fight for as president, to put $1 trillion over 5 years to rebuild our infrastructure and in the process create 13 million good-paying jobs. When we talk about jobs, it is not just creating jobs, which we desperately need to do. It is making sure that we do not continue to lose jobs because of disastrous trade policies. Right? Now, I know trade is not a sexy issue. It's hardly ever discussed in the mainstream media. But it is an enormously important issue for the middle class of this country. You are looking at a senator and a former congressman who voted against NAFTA, CAFTA, permanent normal trade relations, and those were the right votes. And right now, I am helping to lead the opposition to this Trans-Pacific Partnership, which will continue our disastrous trade policies. Since 2001, we have lost almost 60,000 factories in America, millions of decent paying jobs, because companies prefer to shut down here and move abroad and bring their products back home. In my view, if corporate America wants us to purchase their products, and they do every night on TV, buy this, buy that, and buy that, They want us to buy their products. The time is long overdue for them to start manufacturing those products here in New Hampshire, Vermont, and in America. When we use adjectives like greed, recklessness, irresponsibility, fraudulent behavior, these are just a few of the words to describe Wall Street. All of you are aware that as a result of the recklessness and illegal behavior, Wall Street plunged this country into the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. Millions of Americans lost their jobs, their homes, and their life savings, and families have not yet recovered from that economic disaster. Today, we have the 6th largest financial institutions in this country having assets of about $10 trillion, equivalent to 60% of the GDP of America. Many of those very large banks are today larger than they were when we bailed them out because they were too big to fail. In my view, if a bank is too big to fail, it is too big to exist. We have got to break them up. When I was in the House, I was on the House Financial Services Committee, which deals with these things. And I heard from President Clinton, I heard from Alan Greenspan, I heard from liberal Democrats, conservative Republicans, and what they said is, wouldn't it be a great thing if investor banks were able to merge with commercial banks, merge with large insurance companies? How wonderful it would be. Go to YouTube and find what I told Alan Greenspan during the 1990s. I did not think that that was a great idea. I worried what might happen. Just maybe, if these financial institutions failed and what it would mean to the whole economy. Sadly, I was right. And Greenspan actually had to apologize later. Point being, we need a financial system in this country which is not an island unto itself, whose job is to come up with esoteric financial tools that nobody understands, but whose sole job is to make the people on Wall Street even richer. We need a financial system which provides affordable loans to small and medium-sized businesses, which helps people buy homes, which does not, by the way, charge them 15 or 20% interest rates on their credit cards. That's the kind of financial system we need. There is another issue out there that is unique because it impacts every other issue. If you're concerned about education, concerned about infrastructure, concerned about climate change, concerned about healthcare, concerned about kids, concerned about women's rights, gay rights, if you're concerned about any issue, you must be deeply concerned about the pathetic nature of campaign finance in America today. As a result of the disastrous Supreme Court decision in the Citizens United case, the American political system has been totally corrupted, and the foundations of American democracy are being undermined. This is a huge issue which speaks to the future of American democracy. What the Supreme Court said in their 5-4 decision 5 years ago was that what they said to the wealthiest people in this country, they said, okay guys, you already own much of the economy. We are now going to give you the opportunity to purchase at a bargain basement rate the United States government. And that is precisely what is happening today. Read the results. Just super PACs had to come up with their disclosures just very recently. You have fewer than 400 wealthy families in America putting in almost half of all campaign contributions. You have, in instance after instance, super PACs raising more money than the candidates themselves, meaning the campaigns of individuals will be controlled directly by billionaires. You have a situation where the Koch brothers, the second wealthiest family in America, whose ideology calls for the elimination, not the cutting, elimination of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the Post Office, the Environmental Protection Agency. That is exactly what they want to do. They are putting into this campaign cycle almost $1 billion, to elect candidates who will make the rich richer and everybody else poorer. Right this weekend, if my memory is correct, you had Republican candidates running to the Koch brothers, begging the Koch brothers for money, telling them all that they would do to support that right-wing extremist ideology. Now, friends, when you have one family that in an election cycle spends more money than either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, what you are not looking at is democracy. That's not democracy. That is oligarchy, and we've got to stand up and stop that trick. Now, I have not made a whole lot of campaign promises during this campaign so far, but here's one I will repeat to you. No nominee of mine to the United States Supreme Court will be sent, that nominee's name will not be sent to the U.S. Senate for confirmation unless that man or woman is loud and clear and tells the country that their first order of business will be to rehear the Citizens United case and to overturn it. Frankly, overturning Citizens United is not all that we have to do. We've got to go further than that. I am a fervent believer in democracy. I love democracy. I love meetings like this. I love people coming out and talking about the issues of concern to their families. I love when people are running for office regardless of their political point of view. I want to see a nation in which we do not have one of the lowest voter turnouts of any country, but one of the highest voter turnouts. I want to see a nation in which governors and legislatures are not passing legislation to suppress the vote, which we are going to deal with. I want to see legislation passed which makes it easier for people to vote. I want to see in America where if people in this room and people in this country, regardless of their political point of view, whether they're conservatives, moderates, progressives, I want to see young people know that they can run for office if they have that desire, if they're into public service. And I want to see all of our people be able to jump into public service and not have to beg millionaires for campaign support. And that is why I strongly believe in public funding of elections. And within the next several weeks, we are going to have some very explicit ideas about how we can create a campaign finance system so that anybody who wants to run for office will be able to do so and not be beholden to wealthy and powerful forces. There is an issue that I have raised over the last several months, which is resonating all across the country, and I'm very proud of that. And that is that everybody in this room knows that we live in a highly competitive global economy. And that if our people are going to do well now and in the future, we need to have the best educated workforce in the world. It is a disgrace, an undescribable disgrace, that today in America, in New Hampshire, Vermont, all over America, we have hundreds of thousands of young people who are bright, who have done well in school, who are qualified to go to college, but are unable to get a higher education for just one reason. And that reason is their families lack the funds to send them to college. Now, to my mind, it is extremely unfair to low-income kids, to working-class kids, for us to pull the ladder away from them for an opportunity to make it into the middle class. But it is even more disgraceful that we are sabotaging our own future by denying millions of people who want to be doctors and scientists and engineers and teachers and cops or whatever the opportunity to fulfill their intellectual capability. And that is why I have introduced legislation, pretty revolutionary legislation, that would say that in America, every college, every public university is tuition free. And what that means is not only that it will make life easier for those young people who are about to go to college, it has a more profound implication. Right here in Claremont, in Burlington, Vermont, there are kids in the 4th or 5th grade. And those kids, their parents never went to college. My parents never went to college. People in their community never went to college. They have no idea what college is about, and they believe that college is another world away from them. And what ends up happening by the 5th, 6th, 8th, 10th grade, they have given up. They have given up in their guts, with the belief that they're ever going to get a higher education, that they're ever going to make it into the middle class. We can revolutionize education in this country when we say to every kid, you're in the 3rd grade, you're in the 5th grade. If you study hard, if you do your work, you will in fact be able to get a college education regardless of the income of your family. The other part of the legislation I have introduced deals with another total absurdity, and that is that millions of Americans, some young and some not so young, are being crushed by outrageously high student debt and absurd high levels of interest rates. I have talked to people who committed the great crime of going to medical school, coming out $300,000 in debt. I was in Iowa, young woman graduated dental school. We desperately need dentists in this country. $400,000 in debt. Kids graduating college, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 in debt. People paying 25% of their incomes, paying back their student debt year after year after year. Couples can't get married. People can't buy homes, people can't buy cars because they're paying off their student debt. Now, it seems to me a little bit absurd that you can refinance your home for 2%, 3%, 4%, but if you have a student debt, you may be stuck at an 8%, 9%, or 10%. So what our legislation does is pretty simple. It says that you'll be able to refinance your student debt at the best interest rates that you can get. And the second point, right now the government owns obviously much of that debt. And they are making billions in profit from working class families who simply wanted to send their kids to college. I do not believe that the government should be profiteering off of working class families who want to send their kids to college. We're going to end that profiteering. And when we do that, we will drive down interest rates very, very substantially. And people have said to me, and they said, well, Bernie, that's a great idea, but isn't it an expensive idea? And the answer is yes. It is a very expensive idea to make public colleges and universities tuition-free to substantially low interest rates on student debt is about $70 billion a year. It's a lot of money. Bernie, how are you going to pay for that? I will tell you how we're going to pay for it. We're putting a tax on Wall Street speculation. And that will raise more than $70 billion a year. It seems to me that when the greed and illegal behavior of Wall Street drove this country into a horrendous recession, and the middle class had to bail Wall Street out, maybe now is the time for Wall Street to come to the aid of the middle class. When we talk about our human responsibilities, what are our responsibilities as humans, as parents, as grandparents? And one of those responsibilities, it seems to me, is that it is obligatory for us to leave this planet in a way that is healthy and habitable for our kids and our grandchildren. That seems to me a very basic moral responsibility. The debate is over. The scientific community has spoken in a virtually unanimous voice. Climate change is real. Climate change is caused by human activity. Climate change is already causing devastating problems in this country and around the world. Right. And what the scientists have also told us is we have a relatively short window of opportunity to prevent devastating problems. What they are telling us, if we do not get our act together, by the end of this century, planet Earth will be between 5 and 10 degrees Fahrenheit warmer, meaning more drought, more flood, more extreme weather disturbances, more acidification of the ocean, more rising sea levels, flooding coastal communities. And what the CIA and Department of Defense tell us is that climate change is one of the great national security issues we face. Because when people around the world don't have water to drink, when they don't have land to grow their food on, because that land is suffered from drought, people will migrate and there will be conflict of peoples fighting for limited natural resources. In my view, we have the moral responsibility to lead the world. We can't do it alone. We've got to work with China, with Russia, with India, countries all over the world, in transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. That is a moral responsibility which we must fulfill. When we talk about the needs of working families, when we talk about what a civilized democratic society is about, we must understand that the United States of America today remains the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right. Our friends a few miles north of us have their system. The British have their system. Scandinavia has their system. The Germans have their system. Each country has a different system. But they all have several things in common. Number one, they all recognize that healthcare is a right and not a privilege. And second of all, they understand that our system, which still continues to have 35 million Americans with no health insurance, and many people in this room and around the country underinsured with high premiums and high deductibles and high co-payments, that our system is the least cost-effective system in the world. We spend almost twice as much per capita on health care as do the people of any other country. My conclusion is that the United States must join the rest of the industrialized world, guarantee health care to all people as a right, do it in a cost-effective way, which means a Medicare for all single-payer program. In the midst of all of the very serious problems facing our country, there is some very good news that we should be proud of. And that is, over the last several decades, we have made significant progress in making the United States a less discriminatory society. No small thing. If we were sitting in this room 30 years ago, and somebody said, well, you know, I think the United States will have overcome a lot of its racism which goes back to the first settlers who came to this country and the terrible things they did to the Native Americans, racism which dealt with the horrors of slavery, with the horrendous treatment of Asian Americans, discrimination against Italians, Irish, Jews, you name it. That America had gone so far that in 2008, we would be able to elect an African American as President of the United States. And somebody said that here 30 years ago, people would have said, you're a little bit nuts, we're not there yet. But that's what happened. 2008 and 2012, the country had the sense to say, look, we are going to vote for somebody whose ideas we like, whose character we like. We're not going to vote for somebody based on the color of their skin. We should be proud of those significant efforts we made to break down discrimination. We have also made very significant progress in combating sexism. God only knows we still have a long way to go. Attacks against women every single day and women's rights. But nobody would have believed 30 years ago that in your state we would have a woman governor, 2 women senators, and a woman in the House of Representatives. Right? So what that is about is the simple proposition that people should vote for candidates based on their ideas and the job you think they could do. You like the man, vote for the man. You like the woman, vote for the woman. But don't base your decision on somebody's gender. And we have come a long way in America in that regard. We have also broken down all kinds of barriers for work opportunities for women. When I was mayor of the city of Burlington, we hired the first woman police officer in the 1980s. What a big deal it was. It's true. But in the last 30 years, all kinds of barriers. As you all know, we have women in combat. We have women who are generals. We have more women in medical school and law school than we have men. All of those barriers have fallen, and we are becoming a society which looks not at somebody's gender, but on their qualifications and their abilities. In terms, another issue where we have made unbelievable progress. If we were sitting in this room not 30 years ago, not 20 years ago, but 10 years ago, and somebody stood up and said, you know, I think that in some of our more conservative states, legislatures will be voting for gay marriage, people would have thought you were totally nuts. And yet what's happened in the last 10 or 15 years has been a cultural revolution, in that America has said, regardless of your sexual orientation, you deserve to have all of the rights of being an American, including marriage. This is a big deal, and we should be proud of ourselves. But in the midst of all of this, while we have made very significant success in breaking down barriers to people based on discrimination, all of us recognize that we still have a long, long way to go to create the kind of America that we must have. Names like Sandra Bland, Michael Brown, Rekia Boyd, Eric Garner, Walter Scott, Freddie Gray, Demir Rice, Samuel DuBose. You know these names. And you know these names because you understand that some of these people were murdered by police officers, and they would not have been murdered if they were white. But we have got a long way to go in terms of ending racism in America. It is clear to me that we must reform our criminal justice system. Black lives do matter, and we must value black lives. We must move away. And we'll be having more to say on this in terms of specific proposals. But we clearly must move away from the militarization of police forces. You have seen images on TV in Ferguson, Missouri, and elsewhere, which are really hard to grasp as Americans because police departments looked like they were invading armies rather than local law enforcement agencies. And that has got to end. When I was mayor of Burlington and all over this country, good police departments are moving to what we call community police. And community policing means that police officers become integrated into the community. They know the people in the neighborhood know them. And when there are problems, people can go with confidence and say, you know, there's a drug dealer down the street, because they know and trust that police officer. That's the direction we've got to go. We have to make police departments look like the communities that they are policing. We need to make sure that we have reform in police departments which understands that force, which sometimes clearly is necessary, is the last resort, not the first resort. For people who have committed crimes that have landed them in jail, there needs to be a path back from prison. What happens right now, and people I think don't fully appreciate it, if you get arrested and you go to jail, to a very significant way, your life has been radically changed. It's going to be very hard for you to go out and get a job. Your employer says, oh, by the way, what'd you do in the last couple of years? Well, I was in jail. Oh, really? Okay, well, have a nice day. You're not working here. All right. So what we need to do, and the other thing that we do, is we say to people when they leave jail, okay, you served your time, you're out of here, but you don't have a job, you don't have any money, you don't have any housing, you don't have any education. And then we are shocked, just shocked, that the rate of recidivism is as high as it is and people come back to jail. Our job is to make sure that when people leave jail, they have the environment and the infrastructure which keeps them out of jail in the future. We need to take a hard look at drug laws in this country. We need to end the over-incarceration of non-violent young Americans who do not pose a serious threat to our society. It is an obscenity that we stigmatize so many young Americans with a criminal record for smoking marijuana, but not one major Wall Street executive has been prosecuted for causing the worst financial disaster in the history of the country. look at racism in America, it's also important for us to understand what happened last month, the horror that happened in Charleston, South Carolina, where a young man sat down in a prayer session in a church for an hour, praying and discussing the Bible, and then proceeded to take out his gun and kill 9 people. All right? Now, that young man, that sick young man, was influenced significantly by a number of hate groups in this country. We have hundreds of groups whose sole reason for existence is to perpetrate hatred against African Americans, hatred against immigrants, hatred against Jews, Catholics, or anybody who is different than they are. We need the Department of Justice to go after these groups when they break the law. When we talk about justice in America, it is also important to remember that today there are 11 million men, women, and children in this country who are living in the shadows, who are scared about being deported, who are being exploited every single day. I was in Phoenix a couple of weeks ago, talked to some young people, beautiful young people, who were in tears, afraid that they or their parents would be deported. We need to take those people out of the shadows. We need to provide them with legal status. We need comprehensive immigration reform which leads toward citizenship. Now, let me just conclude by saying this. The United States of America today is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. Now, most people don't know that because much of that wealth rests in the hands of the few. But we should not develop or accept the mindset which kind of assumes that we are an impoverished country. Gee, wouldn't it be great if we had a child care system which provided quality child care to all of our young children? But we are a poor nation. We just can't afford it. Wouldn't it be a great idea if we had and guaranteed health care for every man, woman, and child? But we're a poor nation. We can't educate the doctors and the nurses and the medical personnel. Wouldn't it be a wonderful idea if all of our kids and everybody else had the opportunity to get a higher education? But we're a poor country. We just cannot afford to do that. Well, guess what? We are not a poor country. We're the richest country in the history of the world. And there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. So I don't want you to think small. I don't want you to get engaged in debates about whether we cut education by 4% or 2%. Whether we add this many people to the healthcare rolls or that healthcare. I would like you to think big. I would like you to think what kind of country we should become. And in my view, when we put our minds to it, we don't have to have 30, 40, 50% of our kids unemployed. We don't have to have an infrastructure which is crumbling. We don't have to be in a situation we're not addressing climate change or other environmental crises. We can do these things. We can do these things when we do not allow people to divide us up by black and white, by men and women, by gay and straight, by native born and by immigrant. When we stand together and we fight for our kids, when we fight for our parents, there is nothing we cannot accomplish. And that is what this campaign is about.